So this is the treasure chest that I made. And I wanted it kind of bigger, as big as I could hold it on one mat. If you notice, I had to put the lid on a different page in order to fit it on a 12 by 12 mat with any size. So I made mine this size, which is 3 1/4 inch deep, 5 inches wide, and 3 1/4 inches tall, because I wanted to be as big as I could get it on a single mat. Now, if you wanted to make it a different size, if you have a stationary project you want to do, you could make this treasure chest any size that you want. If it was short stationary, you could make stationary maybe some small cards to put in the box, or if you wanted it to be a gift box, you can resize it. But what I did was start with a rectangle the size that I wanted the base of the box to be, and then you can figure out the height from there. So I'll show you this process based on a 3 1/4 inch by 5 inch base, and I just kept the height the same as the depth so that I could fit it on the page here. So you can just here, because the lid extends to the right out here, and I didn't want to use a larger, I don't have larger paper to cut, have a lot of 12 by 12, so I put a tab on the right edge of this shape here so that I could glue this edge of the lid to it. I can bring that over here. I'll just copy Control-C and then Control-Shift-V so that you can see this is the way I would glue it on, like that. So this piece has little tabs so that the lid will curve, as you see in this. The lid also has these kind of octagon shapes. It's not really octagon, but I'll explain that as we go. So we'll get started with this. When I make a 3D project, I think of it in terms of basic shapes, and the basic shapes that I used were, again, the rectangles. So since I had a base here, this is the center, and I put that, just lay it out, and I know that the sides, these 3 pieces are all the same. I just made 3 of them and put them side by side, and then the end pieces I know are squares because they're the same width, the 3 1/4 inch and then 3 1/4 inches high, as you can see up here. So I made 2 of those. To duplicate, I just Control-Shift and click. That gives me a second one just the same. So when I have these pieces, I can select them all and type V to align them vertically, and then I want them to be spaced so that the edges are together. So if I take these 2 pieces and right click and align and space and use align edge bottom, it would line up the edge to the bottom. Let me, got a score line over there. They got to be sort of close. So I'll type V for vertical alignment. I'll take the 2 bottom ones, align and space, and edge bottom, and this lines these up together. Then I'll kind of move them sort of close, and again, right click, line and space, align, edge bottom, and it drew that up so with those two selected, I'll do it again. I usually do it from the bottom. So now all three of these are lined up just the way I want them. And just for a test, I'm going to select all three of these and weld and see if they weld together. Yep, they're perfectly aligned. You notice that there's no more lines here, so I'm going to undo that just to make sure that I've got it right. And then I take these sort of close here. They're all three the same, and I duplicate them just the same. And the align and space horizontally is not quite as perfect as it is up and down, but I can select them and type T to align them at the top. And I do want them to continue to be aligned vertically here. And they need to just barely overlap. Once I get them to this point, then I'm ready to start building with determining where my score lines are going to be and what tabs that I need. So I know this centerpiece is all going to need to be score lines. So what I'm going to do is use Control Shift and just click to make an extra one. I'm going to send it to its own layer at the top by clicking on the smaller of the two plus icons in the lower right corner. And I'm going to change the line style of that one to dashes so I know that it's a score line. Then I can hide that. Now all the rest of these will just be regular cut lines. Makes it kind of nice. Except now I need to add tabs. Now if I add these tabs here are going to glue to the sides to make the bottom of the box. So I need tabs for some of these other sides, and once I have those, some of these are going to be score lines too. This would be a score line and this would be, but I'll wait until I have these all welded together. So I can select these and use my weld icon. And you notice that this wasn't lined up very well, and if that happens I use Control Z as in Z or zebra. Just move it over a couple taps, and then I have my basic box shape here. And then to get these little things, there's any number of ways that you can do it. What I usually do is click on this figure 8 on the left side and use my pen tool. Now if I turn on, I'm going to move the done one over and just move this over here so we can kind of snap to the grid. I've got a snap position. Let's try, 1/4 of an inch, and kind of line it up. So when I click this pen, I don't have to be so precise. It'll actually hop to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to left click at the top. Undo it first though, because I didn't do very well on that. Left click at the top, come down a little bit, maybe 1/4 of an inch, left click, down here, left click, into the side here, left click, and then right click or left click. There, it went to the hidden layer, of course, because it's selected. So what I'll do is select this and send it to its own layer. Now I have one of these. I can very easily create some more. So I'm going to left click this, hold Control Shift and click, and then mirror that and use my arrow keys to move it over. It'll stay the proper height when I get it pretty close there. I can use my outline to see if I got it overlapping, and at type 4 and 3 I can see my lines are slightly, if they're slightly overlapped. If not, I'll write arrows so that they're just barely overlapping. Helps to have them overlapping so when you want to weld you can. So I'll go back to this. Now what I'm going to do is hold a shift key and click both of these, and I'm going to hold Control Shift and just drag another copy down here and put them at the bottom where I need those tabs. And then I'm going to need a tab over here too. I can Control Shift and drag, and what I'll do here is just drag it down a little. And make sure it's overlapping. Again, I'll go to Outline, and so these are all overlapping. I have the main shape, and now what I need to do is just make sure that I add my score lines where they need to be. Now I already have the center score line, so that's not a problem. I made that earlier. But I do need to make sure that I have score lines for these pieces. So what I'm going to do is select that layer that has my score lines. You can double click and change the name to score lines if you tend to forget like I do. So I've got that selected, and what I'm going to do is just draw some score lines in on the edges of all these black lines. So I'll use my pen, and I'm just going to left click and right click, left click and right click, left click, right click. That was a little crooked. And then left click, right click, left click, and right click. So left click starts the line, and right click ends the line. Now I'm going to just go to that layer, click the color icon, and select line style. Click on the create new style and make sure all of those lines are dashes. And I'm going to hide the score lines and move this purple section to the top just by clicking the smaller of the two green plus icons, because the color of the layer on top will give everything that I select that color when I weld it. So now that I have it all selected, I'll just click on Weld. Oh, I see one didn't quite make it close enough, so I'll Control Z undo and left click that a couple times and weld. And now I can show the score lines and right click on that, move the layer to the top so you can see I have the box here all ready to go. It looks like my little example over here, so I can get rid of all of these pieces, and I'm ready to move on to the lid of the treasure chest. So do we have any questions about the main box so far?
No questions so far. Thank you.
So be thinking of your questions, and now we'll go to the lid. Now, some places that I've seen have you cut the lid and make the lid separately, and instead of gluing on a glue tab, they may have you just make a lid and use a strap, kind of like an authentic chest might have, and hinge it with straps rather than a glue tab. But that's entirely up to you. Now, I have made chests like this before that needed to hold some heavy things for my husband's project, And when I did that, I cut this out of some real sturdy cardstock, but I also added an extra 1/2 inch on each of the edges to fold under to make it a little stronger, to reinforce each of the open edges. But for this particular box, it didn't need to be real heavy, so I didn't add any more. But I like to add a 1/2 inch if I'm going to tuck under an edge for a box. So then for the lid, I decided on mine, I used a 1/2 circle because one of the designs I found suggested using a 1/2 circle. But when I tried to fold the lid over the 1/2 circle, it was very difficult to get it lined up. So I thought it might be better to use a shape like this so that the slats on the lid actually corresponded to the shape. So to get this shape, what I did was go to basic shapes, and I went to polygons, and I found a dodecagon. It has 12 sides. So I'm going to double click this. The reason that I wanted a dodecagon is that I knew I wanted to cut it in half, and I needed to have 7 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sides. And I realized that if I click on the editing tool, that's the second arrow from the top, and deleted the bottom sections, just left click and delete, that I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 equal sides, which is what I wanted. So this makes it pretty simple to make. Now the next thing I needed to do was to resize this so that it fit my, and I'll click the lock so that it's gold, and I wanted the width to match the width of the box, which is 3.25, and press enter. And it doesn't matter how tall it is so much as how wide it is, because let me copy that and paste it, Control Shift V. I want it to be able to be the same width as the box. So I'll go back here to the lid. So this is how I got this shape. Now what I need to know is, well, how long does my lid have to be in order to fit comfortably around these edges? So to find that out, I clicked on this ruler icon at the bottom of the left toolbar, and then when I hover over that line, I can see at the top it tells me that the path length is 6.0958 inches. 6.0958. So I write that down because I can't remember from 1 minute to the next. 6.09, and I have to be hovering over it for that to show. 6.0958. So that means that from here to here, my box needs to measure that. Well, I wonder how long this is. If I select this, that should be 6.09 wide. It's not showing me that. Oh, there it is. So up at the top you see it's 5.8750. So it's not quite long enough. So I know that I need to make this a little longer if it's going to fit all the way around. So I'm going to show you how I assembled this piece, but then once I have it assembled, I'm going to make sure I make an adjustment. The next thing that I wanted to measure was just this one little piece, let's say from a left click here from the bottom up to the first segment. I'm going to have to turn off snapping and just go up to the end of that to see, well, how tall is each one of these little pieces? And I can't keep my hand still to do this. That's why I'm not an artist. I see that each one of these lines is 0.875. Let's see how long this one is. They should all be the same. If I could measure them carefully, 0.85. Well, let's see how wide did I make this. I made this 0.85. I think I will make it 0.87 because this turned out to be a little bit short. So what I did was I came in here to the basic shapes, and under all categories I'm just going to type in SQ to get the square. Double click. And to resize this, I'm going to make the width of this with the green lock icon 0.87, and the height will be the 5 inches that my box is. That's how wide the box is. And I need 7 of these to go around this lid here. So I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate, and I'm going to have the spacing be a minus 0.01, so they're barely overlapping. I've got 7 columns and 1 row, and then Apply. Now when I have all of this selected, I see that it's 6.03, and I wonder if that's the same width as what I needed here. Let me check this. 6.09 is the length of this. So this actually needs to be just a hair bigger. So what I'm going to do is change this to 6.09 and enter. So it's just a little wider. The width of each one of these then is 0.8787. And it doesn't matter as long as it will fit. So I think what I'll do is I'll send these up and change the color so we can see it a little easier. And so I have these, and now I need this other little shape at the top of each one of these. I'm going to come in here to the basic shapes and type in TR to get the trapezoid. Double click. Now this one, I'm going to make this the width to be 0.8787 and tab to make this 0.5, and then I'm going to flip this over You can zoom in a little bit to make sure that it's lined up right. And I'm going to hold Shift and select both of these and then type in V to vertically align it. And now that I have this, I'm going to use Control Shift click. I might use my down arrow to move this down and flip it over. So now I'm going to just get rid of these pieces and multiply this one again. I want to make sure they're all lined up. Typing a V. It looks okay. And again, duplicate. And since it was not quite, I think it's okay. We'll hit apply. So now I have 7 of these, and I've got the width here, and this is where you know, when you're doing 3D stuff, the measurements are really important. So the width, it says 6.0909. That looks good. And I'm going to, again, measure this to make sure that 6.0958. I better make this 6.0958. Enter. Okay, so now I think we have a better project here. And I also know that I'm going to need some score lines. And if I click on the larger of the two plus icons at the bottom of the screen, I get a new layer here. And on that layer, I'm going to click on my pen, and I'm just going to, again, zoom in a little closer. And I'm going to left click right where this line is, and then right click at the bottom of the line. It would be easier if I had snapping on. Right click to end that. Now I'm going to click on the selection arrow and select that line. And again, I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate. And this time I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I need a seventh one over here too. I need 7. But what I don't want them spaced at a minus. I want a different spacing here, so duplicate. So the spacing is probably going to be 0.87, and that's a little bit too much, so I'm going to backspace a little bit because I want these to line up perfectly. So you can adjust these numbers using the arrow here, or you can just type in numbers. It looks like 0.86 works here, so I'll apply that. So now I can go up to that layer and select the line style of dashes and click OK. And I'll hide those because what I want to do now is weld all these together. And I'll change the color and show my lines, my dashed lines here. So the only other thing I need to do is to add a tab over here. Now I could use this original little shape here. Now you don't have to have this tab, but I found that having the front overlap a little bit, like this fits snugly around my box, but you see that the edge of the box is here, and the lid is all of this, but I extended this flap a little bit more so that it could close all the way, and then I made a little lock to go on the front for decoration. So if you want to do that, I'm going to go back to my page now. Oh, there it is. I could take this piece, and if I click twice, I can change the angle of this top line a little bit just by moving that distortion handle a little bit. And now I can drag that over here to the right side, and I can weld that to my shape here. Again, when I weld, I like to hide my score lines, make sure the shape is overlapping slightly, select both and weld. Now I can show my score lines. So the only additional score lines I need are at the top. So with that score line layer selected, I'm going to click again on my tool, left click, and right click. Then I'll left click and right click. And since they're on the same layer, and since I joined them to the previously drawn score lines, all of the lines are automatically scored. So now I have my lid that's going to be ready to attach to the box. And I know that it's going to fit probably better than this other one that I had, but I can always resize it to match. Now, this one doesn't have a closed bottom, so closing it, I can click on the pen and left click on the green dot and right click to close that shape, so I have the end. I need another one, so I'm going to hold Control Shift click so I have the other end, and I'll just flip it, and now I can make those the same color. So I have my two end pieces and my lid is ready to go. And I can get rid of these empty layers on the layer properties by clicking the trash can. So I have my score lines on one layer, which can be changed to be solid lines if you prefer solid. And then we have the chest over here. So for assembly, I just put glue here on the tabs, glued the sides, then I glued the edge of the lid here, and this is the front flap. It doesn't get glued to anything. And then these tabs, I did mountain folds and then glued each tab to one of these edges of the base, the side of the lid. Same with this one. And this is what came out. So do we have any questions about that?
There was one question from Evelyn that asked, how would I create a box base of 6 inches rather than 5 inches?
Well, let's go back to this page here. What I would do is, again, start with the size that I want. So I've got a square here, double click the square. And if I want it to be 6 inches tall, because I do have a little more room here, but it might not fit on the page, which would be my main concern. And if it wouldn't fit on the page, I'm going to make this 6 inches tall. And maybe I'll just use the 3.25 inches wide and press enter. I'll rotate it this way. So you'll notice that I'll just hold Control Shift and drag, and I'll make this one 3.25, enter, and make 2 of those. So if I line these up, you'll notice that it's wider than my 12-inch page. So if I wanted to do this, definitely 6 inches here, maybe I would want to, if I needed to keep it on, maybe I would want it just 3 inches so that it would total 12. Maybe I want it, then everything would be 3 inches wide instead of 3.25. I could fit it on a page. The other option is, 6 and 3 and 3 is 12. So 6, 3, and 3. So do we have a 12-inch? It says it's higher, so I didn't get it right. Oh, I got the height at 3.25. 3 and 3. So if you don't mind the depth being off, you know, a little bit, not as thick, but longer and narrower, you could still get it on one page. If you would rather make it deeper, you know, leave it the 3 1/4 inches, or even make it 4 inches, you could do that, but you would make it by removing one of these angles and making a tab so that it can glue on as well. So I'm not sure, how wide do you want it as that would make a difference. If it's 6 inches long, and is it okay if it's 3 inches high? If it is, then you would just do it that way, and then move this, Control Shift and click, and then we would do exactly the same thing as we just did. I can make this a green mat so we can see. So I would make these and then add the tabs just like we did, and then on the lid, instead of making this 3 1/4 inches, I would probably make it just the way that I did, but I would resize that down to 3 inches, maybe after I'm done. I'm going to undo that. 3 inches with the lock icon on.
She wrote she wanted it 4 inches wide, so I understand about the additional sections. Thanks.
So then you have to make sure that your end fits. So just as I cut the lid off here and put it on another page, you would do the same with this end here, and you would cut it off. When I make it, I just make it so this is another piece, and I would make a fold tab either on this box or on this one, and put this on the other page, and then I could make each of these to be 4 inches wide. And I was thinking of that also, if I wanted to do a stationary box, I would need to probably do it 4 1/4, or maybe even 4 1/2 by 6. And then these on the end would have to be 4 inches. By 4 inches. And again, one would have to go to the other page, and then you can do the alignment, and it would fit now all on this page. 3 times 4 is right at 12. So then you would cut this and take it over here, Control Shift V, and then this would be with the orange lock icon on, you type 4, and your bigger piece here would fit on the end. So then I would want to make sure, well, what is the size of this? And again, if I just delete that temporarily and I can measure, I know that my lid has to be 7 1/2 inches wide. So I can take this and I can 7 1/2 plus another half for the flap. This is going to be 8 inches wide, and it's going to be 6 inches plus the tabs tall, so 7 inches tall. And then this should fit over this edge here. So instead of having these, I would have left click and right click. We would have these to work with. So you can do the same process, and you can make these any size that you want for any purpose. You just need to make sure that you cut the extra for your box and then add the tab so you can glue it on there. So when you add your tabs, you're going to put a tab here, here, and here, and one here. It doesn't really matter which side the tab goes on. Then if you want straps to go all the way around, it's a good idea to measure your box when it's done to get the straps, and I just kind of put some basic shapes together to do a little little lock, and so you can do your custom box any size that you want, and it'll work.